The sky had been clear all morning when Lila Warren decided to cross the canyon alone. But in the wild territories of Julian, California, in the summer of 1878, death could arrive faster than a rattlesnake strike. She had been riding toward the mining settlement for 3 days, leaving behind the coastal town where her father's debts had finally consumed everything they owned. At 22 years old, Lila carried little more than a worn leather satchel, her mother's silver locket, and a letter promising employment at the general store owned by her late aunt's husband. The August heat shimmered across the rocky terrain, turning the landscape into a wavering mirage. Her horse, a gentle mare named Bess, picked her way carefully along the narrow trail that wound through the canyon. Lila noticed the change in the air first, a coolness that seemed impossible given the blazing sun overhead. Then she heard it, a distant rumble like thunder, though no clouds darkened the sky. She urged Bess forward, but the mare suddenly planted her hooves, ears flattening against her skull. That was when Lila looked upstream and saw the wall of water bearing down through the canyon. Flash floods were the desert's cruelest trick. Somewhere miles away, a summer storm had unleashed its fury on the mountains, and now that water funneled through the narrow canyon with the force of a locomotive. Lila had perhaps 30 seconds to react. She kicked Bess hard, trying to reach higher ground, but the canyon walls were steep and smooth. The water struck them like a physical blow. The world became chaos. Brown churning water filled with debris and rocks engulfed her completely. Lila felt herself torn from the saddle, pulled under by currents that seemed determined to drag her to the bottom. She surfaced, gasping, her lungs burning as she fought to keep her head above water. A tree branch slammed into her shoulder, spinning her around. She grabbed for it instinctively, her fingers finding purchase on the rough bark. The water carried her downstream at a terrifying speed. Canyon walls blurred past. Lila's arms screamed in protest as she clung to the branch, her sodden skirts threatening to pull her under with every surge. She could hear the roar growing louder ahead, a sound that made her blood turn to ice. The falls. She had seen them marked on her map, a 30-foot drop where the canyon narrowed and the creek plunged into a rocky pool below. At this speed, with this much water, going over meant death. She tried to kick toward the shore, but the current was merciless. Her grip on the branch began to slip, her fingers numb and weak. This was how she would die, alone in a canyon miles from anywhere, her body never to be found. Her father would never know what happened to her. Then she heard hoofbeats. Through the spray and chaos, Lila glimpsed a rider on the canyon's edge, moving parallel to the flood. A man on a buckskin horse, both moving at a flat-out gallop across terrain that would kill most riders. The horse leaped obstacles with the grace of a mountain cat, while the rider leaned low over its neck. His hat pulled tight against the wind. Harrison Garrett had been tracking wild horses in the high country when he saw the water come through. He had grown up in these canyons, the son of a horse trader who had taught him every trail and path before dying of pneumonia 5 winters past. At 26, Harrison knew this land better than he knew his own reflection. He knew about the falls. And he had seen the woman swept past, clinging to that branch like it was salvation itself. His horse, a gelding named Copper, was the finest animal Harrison had ever owned. Together they raced along the canyon rim, Harrison's mind calculating distances and speeds with the precision of long experience. The falls were a quarter-mile ahead. The woman would reach them in less than 2 minutes. He had one chance. The canyon wall sloped down about 200 yards before the falls, a treacherous descent of loose rock and scrub brush. Harrison aimed Copper straight for it. The horse never hesitated, sliding and leaping down the slope in controlled chaos. Rocks clattered away beneath them. Harrison kept his weight back, trusting Copper's instincts completely. They hit the bottom with jarring force. Harrison was already shaking out his rope, building a loop as Copper raced along the flood's edge. The water was perhaps 10 feet wide here, compressed by the narrowing canyon into a churning torrent. Harrison could see the woman clearly now, her dark hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide with terror as she spotted the falls ahead. He had to get ahead of her. Harrison urged Copper faster, and the horse responded with a burst of speed that would have done a thoroughbred proud. They pulled even with the woman, then ahead. Harrison looked back, judging the distance. The roar of the falls was deafening now, 50 yards to the drop. Harrison wheeled Copper around, the gelding's hooves scrambling for purchase on the wet rocks. He built his loop larger, saying a prayer to whatever deity might be listening. His father had taught him to rope when he was 6 years old. He had caught everything from wild mustangs to runaway cattle. But he had never roped anything that mattered this much. 30 yards. The woman's branch struck a rock and splintered. She went under, surfaced, her arms flailing. 20 yards, Harrison threw. The loop sailed through the spray and settled around Lila's shoulders. She grabbed at it instinctively, and Harrison immediately dallied the rope around his saddle horn. The line went taut with brutal force, jerking Lila toward the shore even as it nearly yanked Harrison from the saddle. Copper sat back on his haunches, trained muscles straining as he took the weight. 10 yards from the falls, Harrison was already swinging down, wrapping the rope around his hands as he waded into the shallower water at the edge. The current tried to tear his legs from under him, but he planted his boots and pulled, hand over hand, fighting for every inch. Lila came toward him, no longer fighting the rope, just holding on. 5 yards. His hands found her arm. He hauled her against him, lifting her bodily from the water as he staggered backward. They fell together onto the rocky shore just as the current would have taken them both. Harrison could feel the spray from the falls on his face, could see the water plunging into the void mere feet away. For a long moment, they lay there gasping. Lila coughed up water, her whole body shaking. Harrison kept his arms around her, his heart hammering so hard he thought his ribs might crack. Copper stood nearby, sides heaving, the rope still taut to his saddle. "Are you hurt?" Harrison finally managed. His voice was hoarse, barely audible over the falls. Lila shook her head, then nodded, then seemed unsure. "I do not know," she gasped. "I cannot feel anything." He helped her sit up, his hands checking for broken bones with the practiced efficiency of someone who had doctored horses and men alike. Her shoulder was badly bruised where the branch had struck her, and she had cuts and scrapes everywhere, but nothing seemed broken. She had been incredibly lucky. "Can you stand?" he asked. She tried, but her legs gave out immediately. The cold water and shock had taken everything from her. Harrison caught her easily, lifting her in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he realized she was probably half-starved. Her clothes were expensive once, but worn and patched now. Her face had the gauntness of someone who had missed too many meals. "My horse," Lila said suddenly, trying to look back upstream. "Bess, she was. If she survived, she will find her way to water and grass," Harrison said gently. "Horses are smart that way. We can look for her once you are safe." He carried her to Copper, who stood steady as stone despite his exhaustion. Getting them both mounted took some maneuvering, but finally Harrison settled into the saddle with Lila cradled against his chest. She had stopped protesting, which worried him. Her skin was cold despite the heat, her lips tinged blue. Shock was setting in hard. Harrison's ranch was an hour's ride back up the canyon, following a trail only he and a handful of others knew. He pushed copper as fast as he dared with the double load. Lila drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring things he could not quite hear. He kept talking to her, nonsense mostly, just to keep her focused on his voice. The ranch house appeared like an oasis in the wilderness. It was not much, just a simple wood frame building with a barn and corral, but Harrison had built it with his own hands after his father died. It sat in a small valley where a spring provided year-round water, surrounded by hills that broke the worst of the desert winds. He carried Lila inside, laying her on his bed. The house was bachelor simple, one room with a sleeping area, a small kitchen, and a stone fireplace. Harrison got a fire going despite the heat, knowing she needed warmth. Then he found clean blankets and set about the awkward task of getting her out of her wet clothes. "I need to remove these," he said, keeping his voice clinical. "You will get sick otherwise. I will not look more than necessary." Lila nodded weakly, past the point of modesty. Harrison worked quickly, averting his eyes as much as possible, and wrapped her in dry blankets. Only then did he tend to his horse, rubbing copper down and giving him extra grain. The gelding had earned it 10 times over. When Harrison returned inside, Lila was awake, her eyes tracking him as he moved around the room. He heated water and made coffee, strong and black, sweetened with precious sugar. He helped her sit up enough to drink it, and some color began returning to her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." "Could not very well let you go over the falls," Harrison said, trying for lightness despite the tremor in his own hands. Now that the crisis had passed, the fear was catching up with him. Another 30 seconds and she would have been gone. "What is your name?" Lila asked. "Harrison Garrett. Most people call me Harrison, though some of the old-timers still call me Harry like they did when I was a boy." "I am Lila Warren. I was traveling to Julian. My aunt's husband owns the general store there, Mr. Peterson. He offered me work." Harrison nodded. He knew Peterson, a decent man who had lost his wife the previous winter. "That is still half a day's ride from here. What were you doing in the canyon?" "I thought it was a shortcut." Lila looked down at her hands, wrapped around the coffee cup. "I've been traveling for days and I wanted to arrive before dark. That was foolish." "The desert does not forgive foolishness," Harrison agreed. "But you survived. That takes more than foolishness. That takes strength." She looked up at him then, really seeing him for the first time. Harrison was tall and lean, with the weathered face of someone who lived outdoors. His hair was dark brown, long enough to touch his collar, and his eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green. There was a quiet competence to him, a sense that this was a man who could handle whatever the world threw at him. "How did you know about the falls?" Lila asked. "I grew up here. My father traded horses with the miners and ranchers. He taught me every trail, every water source, every dangerous spot in these mountains. The falls have claimed lives before, probably will again." "Not today," Lila said softly. "Because of you." Harrison felt his face warm. He was not accustomed to gratitude, having lived alone for so long. "You should rest. I will cook something. You look like you have not eaten properly in days." He was not wrong. Lila had been rationing her food supplies, making them stretch. As Harrison cooked beans and bacon over the fire, the smell made her stomach cramp with hunger. When he brought her a plate piled high, she ate ravenously, past the point of embarrassment. Harrison ate his own meal by the fire, giving her space. When she finished, exhaustion crashed over her like another wave. Her eyes kept closing despite her efforts to stay awake. "Sleep," Harrison said. "You are safe here. I will take the floor." "This is your bed," Lila protested weakly, "and you nearly drowned today. Sleep." She was too tired to argue further. Within moments she was unconscious, her breathing deep and even. Harrison made himself a bedroll by the fire and lay awake for a long time, listening to her breathe, still unable to quite believe he had reached her in time. The next morning, Lila woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. Every muscle in her body ached. She sat up slowly, discovering someone had laid out clothes for her. Men's clothes, far too large but clean and dry. Her own dress hung by the fire, nearly dry now but stained and torn. Harrison was outside when she emerged, dressed in his oversized shirt and pants, the legs rolled up multiple times. He was working with a horse in the corral, moving with the easy grace of someone completely at home with animals. The horse, a young mare, watched him with wary eyes but did not bolt. "Morning," Harrison called when he spotted her. "How do you feel?" "Like I fought a bear and lost," Lila admitted. "But alive. Thank you again for the clothes. They were my father's. He was smaller than me, so they might fit you better once we take them in some. Your dress will need mending." Lila came to the corral fence, watching him work. "What are you doing?" Gentling this mare. "She is from the wild herd I was tracking yesterday. I caught her 2 weeks back, and she is starting to come around. Wild horses make the best mounts if you can earn their trust." "Is that what Copper is?" "A wild horse. Was. Now he is the best partner a man could ask for." Harrison smiled, and the expression transformed his usually serious face. "Horses are honest. They do not lie or cheat or pretend to be something they are not. You know exactly where you stand with them." Lila found herself smiling back. "I think I understand that. My horse Bess, she was the only good thing I had left after my father's business collapsed." Harrison's expression turned sympathetic. "I am sorry about your horse and your father's business. That is a hard thing." "It was his own fault, mostly," Lila said, surprising herself with the honesty. She had not spoken about this with anyone. "He gambled, made bad investments. I tried to help manage the books, but he would not listen to a daughter's advice. By the end, we lost everything. The house, the shop, even the furniture was sold to pay debts." "Is that why you are going to Julian?" "Mr. Peterson is the only family I have left, and even that is just by marriage. My aunt died before I was born, but he remembered her fondly. When I wrote asking for help, he offered me work in his store. It is charity, I know, but I had nowhere else to go." Harrison stopped working with the mare and came to the fence, leaning against it beside her. "Starting over takes courage. You should be proud of that, not ashamed." "I do not feel courageous. I feel terrified." "Most courageous people do," Harrison said. "My father used to say that bravery is not the absence of fear, but doing what needs to be done despite it. You left everything familiar and traveled alone across dangerous country to make a new life. That is the definition of courage." Lila looked at him, this stranger who had saved her life and now offered her words she had not realized she needed to hear. "What about you? Do you live out here all alone?" "Mostly. I sell horses to the miners and ranches, make enough to get by. It is a quiet life, but I like the quiet. The silence out here is different from loneliness. There is peace in it." "Do you ever get lonely, though?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Especially in winter when the snow comes and I might not see another person for weeks. But I have the horses and the land and my memories of my father. It has been enough." The word enough hung in the air between them, and Lila heard everything it did not say. Enough, but not fulfilling. Enough, but not what he might want if he let himself want more. They spent the morning working together around the ranch. Harrison showed Lila how to mix grain for the horses, how to check their hooves for stones, how to read their moods by the set of their ears and the tension in their bodies. She was a quick learner, and he found himself enjoying having someone to talk to, someone who listened with genuine interest. Around midday, they spotted a horse approaching from the canyon. Lila gave a cry of joy when she recognized Bess. The mare was muddy and exhausted, but alive and uninjured. She had followed the scent of the other horses to Harrison's ranch. "She found you," Harrison said, helping Lila greet the tired mare. "I told you horses are smart." Lila threw her arms around Bess's neck, tears streaming down her face. Harrison turned away, giving her privacy for the emotional moment, but he felt his throat tighten with shared relief. That afternoon, as they tended to Bess and made sure she was fed and watered, Harrison broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "You will want to get to Julian soon. Peterson will be expecting you." "Yes," Lila said, though she felt a strange reluctance at the thought of leaving. "I should go tomorrow if Bess is rested enough. I will ride with you. The regular trail is safer, but still not something a woman should travel alone. There are men in these mountains who would not be as helpful as I was." Lila knew he meant outlaws and worse. The mining camps attracted all kinds, and not all of them were good men. "I would appreciate that." That evening they sat by the fire as the desert cooled around them. Harrison had given Lila back her mended dress, the tears sewn up with surprisingly neat stitches. She had changed behind a blanket he had hung for privacy, and now wore her own clothes again, feeling more herself despite the stains that would not come out. "Tell me about your father," Lila said. "You speak of him with such fondness." Harrison smiled, his eyes distant with memory. "Thomas Garrett. He came west after the war, said he had seen enough of killing and wanted to build something instead. He chose horses because they had saved his life more than once during the fighting. He had a gift with them, could calm the most fractious animal. He taught me everything he knew." "How did he die?" "Pneumonia, 5 years back. It was a bad winter and he got caught in a snowstorm checking on the stock. By the time he made it back, he was already sick. He lasted 3 days. I sat with him the whole time." Harrison's voice was steady, but Lila could hear the old pain beneath it. "At the end, he told me he was proud of me, that I had become a good man. Those were his last words." "I am so sorry," Lila said softly. "He had a good life. Not a long one, but a good one. That is more than many people get." Harrison looked at her across the fire. "What about your mother?" "She died when I was 12. A fever that swept through our town. My father never recovered from losing her. I think that is when he started gambling, trying to fill the emptiness. It did not work, of course. It never does." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their lives, their losses, their hopes. Lila found herself telling Harrison things she had never told anyone, and he reciprocated with a rare openness that surprised them both. When she finally went to sleep, she felt something she had not felt in years, a connection to another human being that went deeper than polite conversation. The next morning, they prepared for the journey to Julian. Harrison packed supplies and saddled Copper while Lila got Bess ready. The mare had recovered well, showing the resilience of her kind. As they mounted up and rode out of the valley, Lila found herself looking back at the small ranch house with something like regret. The trail to Julian wound through hills studded with scrub oak and manzanita. Harrison pointed out landmarks, telling stories about the land and its history. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat lunch beside a small creek. "Can I ask you something?" Lila said as they sat in the shade. "Of course. Why do you live so isolated?" "I mean, I understand wanting peace, but you are still young. Do you never think about having a family, a wife?" Harrison was quiet for a while, watching the water flow past. "I have thought about it," he finally said. "But the women in Julian, they want husbands who will live in town, who will give them a proper house and a social life. I cannot offer that. My life is with the horses, out in the wild country. It would not be fair to ask someone to share that." "Have you asked? Maybe someone would want that life." "Maybe." He looked at her then, something unspoken passing between them. What about you? No young man waiting back home, Lila laughed, but there was bitterness in it. No, my father's debts ruined any prospects I might have had. The respectable men disappeared quickly once word spread about our situation, and the disreputable ones, well, I wanted nothing to do with them. Their loss, Harrison said firmly. Any man would be lucky to have you. Lila felt her face warm. You barely know me. I know you are brave enough to start over, smart enough to survive a flash flood, kind enough to weep with joy over your horse being safe. That is enough to know someone's character. They rode on in comfortable silence, but something had shifted between them. Lila found herself hyper-aware of Harrison's presence beside her, the easy way he sat his horse, the quiet competence in everything he did. And Harrison found his gaze drawn to her again and again, to the determination in her face, the grace with which she handled difficulty. Julian appeared in the late afternoon, a rough mining town clinging to the hillside. The main street was packed dirt, lined with wooden buildings that showed the hasty construction common to boom towns. Miners mixed with ranchers, merchants, and the occasional family trying to build a legitimate life. Peterson's general store was near the center of town, a two-story building with living quarters above the shop. Mr. Peterson himself came out when he saw them approaching, a portly man in his 50s with a kind face and thinning hair. "Miss Warren," he called, "I had begun to worry when you did not arrive yesterday." "I ran into trouble in the canyon," Lila said, dismounting. "If not for Mr. Garrett, I would not have made it at all." She told the story quickly while Peterson listened with growing alarm. When she finished, he turned to Harrison with genuine gratitude. "You have my eternal thanks, son. I promised my late wife I would look after her family, and I would have failed her if harm had come to Lila." "I am just glad I was there," Harrison said. He looked at Lila, something complicated in his expression. "You will be safe here. Peterson is a good man. Will you stay in town tonight?" Lila asked, not wanting him to leave yet. "Let your horse rest." Harrison hesitated and Peterson jumped in. "Of course he will. I insist. You both must be exhausted. I have a room above the store for Lila, and Harrison, the hotel owes me a favor. You will stay there as my guest." Harrison could not refuse without being rude. He nodded his acceptance, and Lila felt relief flood through her. One more night. One more chance to figure out what she was feeling. That evening, after Lila had settled into her room and changed into the spare dress Peterson provided, there was a knock at her door. It was Harrison, cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt he must have purchased from the store. "I thought I would check on you," he said. "Make sure you are settling in." "Come in," Lila said, stepping back. The room was simple but comfortable, with a real bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Harrison stood awkwardly near the door, his hat in his hands. "This is a good situation," he said. "Peterson will treat you well. You will be safe here." "Safe," Lila repeated. The word felt hollow. "Yes, I suppose I will be." "You do not sound convinced." Lila turned to look out the window at the bustling street below. "It is a good opportunity. I should be grateful. I am grateful. But standing here, looking at this town, I cannot help but wonder if I am just trading one cage for another." "What do you mean?" "Back home, I was trapped by my father's debts, by society's expectations, by the limitations placed on what a woman could do or be. Now I will work in a store, serving customers, being grateful for charity. It is better than starving, but it is still a cage of sorts." Harrison came to stand beside her at the window. "What would you do if you could do anything?" Lila laughed softly. "I do not know. That is the worst part. I have spent so long just surviving that I have forgotten how to dream. Yesterday, when I was clinging to that branch in the flood, all I could think was that I did not want to die having never really lived. You are living now. Am I, or am I just continuing to survive?" Harrison was quiet, understanding in his silence. Finally, he said, "When my father was dying, he told me something I have never forgotten. He said that life is too short to live it for other people's expectations, that the only real failure is never trying to be happy." Was he happy? I think so. He chose the life he wanted and lived it fully. Even when things were hard, even when he was alone after the war, he made choices that were true to himself. Lila turned to face him. "Is that what you are doing? Living true to yourself?" "I thought I was," Harrison said slowly. "But these past 2 days, having someone to talk to share meals with, to work alongside, I realize how much I have been missing. I convinced myself that solitude was what I wanted, but maybe I was just afraid of caring about someone and losing them like I lost my father." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Lila reached out and took his hand. "I am afraid too, afraid of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person, of ending up worse off than I started." Harrison's fingers closed around hers. What if it was not a mistake? What if it was the opposite? "What are you saying?" He took a breath, gathering courage. "Come back to the ranch with me, not as a guest or someone I rescued, but as a partner. Help me with the horses, build something together. I know it is crazy, we barely know each other, but yesterday when I thought I might not reach you in time, I felt something I have not felt since my father died. I felt like I would be losing something precious." Lila's heart hammered in her chest. "Harrison, that is madness. We have known each other 2 days. I know, I told you it was crazy, but sometimes the craziest things make the most sense. You said yourself you do not want to live in a cage. Well, the ranch is not a cage, it is freedom. Hard work, yes, and lonely sometimes, but freedom to be yourself, to make your own choices. What about Mr. Peterson? He is expecting me to work for him. We will talk to him together, explain the situation. He is a good man, he will understand." Lila pulled her hand away, pacing the small room. Everything Harrison said made a wild kind of sense, but it was terrifying. She barely knew him. This could be another disaster like her father's poor choices. But when she thought about staying in Julian, working in the store, living the safe, predictable life that was being offered, something in her chest constricted. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I will be here tomorrow morning. If you decide to come, I will be waiting. If not, I will wish you well and ride out of your life." After Harrison left, Lila lay awake for hours, her mind spinning. She thought about her mother, who had been an adventurous woman before marriage domesticated her. She thought about all the dreams she had abandoned over the years, convinced they were impossible. She thought about Harrison's hand in hers, the sense of rightness she had felt. Morning came without her having slept. Lila rose and dressed carefully, then went downstairs to find Mr. Peterson opening the store. "You are up early," he said cheerfully. "Eager to start work, Mr. Peterson. I need to speak with you about something." His face grew concerned at her tone. "What is it, my dear?" Lila told him everything. About Harrison's proposal, about her doubts and fears, about the unexpected connection she felt. Peterson listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "You are worried I will be disappointed. You offered me help when I had nothing. I do not want to seem ungrateful. Lila, my wife, was a spirited woman, much like you. She hated being told what she could or could not do. When I met her, she was planning to travel to San Francisco alone to become a seamstress, which her family thought was scandalous. I convinced her to marry me instead, and sometimes I wonder if I robbed her of an adventure she needed. I am sure she did not think that. Maybe not. We had a good life together, but I saw the wistfulness in her eyes sometimes when travelers came through with stories of distant places. I do not want to be the person who puts that wistfulness in your eyes." He reached out and patted her hand. "Harrison Garrett is a good man. I have known him since he was a boy. If you care for him and if he is offering you a life you want, then take it. You do not owe me anything, but the store will still be here if things do not work out. And if they do work out, well, I will dance at your wedding and count myself blessed to have played a small part in your happiness." Tears filled Lila's eyes. Thank you so much. Go on now. He is waiting at the stable, looking like a man facing his own hanging. Put him out of his misery." Lila ran. She ran down the street, ignoring the startled looks from early risers, her skirts held high. She found Harrison at the stable, standing beside Copper, his face haggard with sleeplessness and worry. "Lila," he said, straightening when he saw her. "Have you?" "Yes," she gasped out, breathless from running and emotion. "Yes, I will come with you. Yes to all of it." The expression on his face was worth every risk, every uncertainty. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and caught her up in his arms, spinning her around. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "You are sure?" he asked. "I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am terrified," Lila admitted, "but I am sure. I do not want to play it safe anymore. I want to live." They rode out of Julian within the hour, Lila's few possessions packed on Bess. As the town disappeared behind them, Lila felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope for the future. The ride back to the ranch felt different from the journey out. They talked constantly, learning about each other with the eagerness of new lovers. Harrison told her about his plans for the ranch, his dreams of building a proper barn and expanding the herd. Lila shared her love of books and her secret skill at sewing, which she had never pursued because her father thought it beneath their station. "There is no station out here," Harrison said, "just what we build with our own hands." When they reached the valley and the ranch house came into view, Lila felt a surprising sense of homecoming. It was not much, this rough building in the wilderness, but it represented something precious. Freedom. Choice. A new beginning. That night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Harrison took her hand. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly, even if we are living in the same house. You can have the bedroom. I will sleep out here until we decide to marry, if we decide to marry." "You are very sure of yourself," Lila teased. "What makes you think I will want to marry you?" "Nothing," he said seriously. "I hope you will, but I want you to be sure. I want you to know me fully, good and bad, before you commit to anything." Lila's heart melted at his earnestness. She leaned forward and kissed him, brief and sweet. "I think I am already sure, but I appreciate your honor." The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked together with the horses, Lila proving to have a natural gift for the work. She was patient and gentle, and the animals responded to her with trust. Harrison taught her to ride better, to rope, to read the weather signs. In turn, she brought order to the chaos of his household, sewing curtains for the windows and organizing his scattered possessions. They talked endlessly, discovering shared values and complementary differences. Harrison was quiet and thoughtful where Lila was impulsive and passionate. She drew him out of his shell, making him laugh more than he had in years. He grounded her, providing stability and calm when her emotions ran high. One evening, about a month after Lila arrived at the ranch, they were working together to gentle a particularly stubborn stallion. The horse had been fighting them all day, refusing to accept the halter. Lila approached him differently than Harrison had, singing softly as she moved. The stallion's ears pricked forward, his aggressive posture softening. "Keep going," Harrison whispered. "He likes your voice." Lila continued singing, an old lullaby her mother had taught her. Step by step, she approached until she could lay her hand on the stallion's neck. He flinched but did not bolt. Harrison slipped the halter on while the horse was distracted by Lila's song, and just like that, the battle was won. "You have a gift," Harrison said when they had the stallion secured in the corral. "A real gift." "I had a good teacher," Lila replied. They stood close together, dusty and tired from the day's work. Harrison reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "I love you," he said quietly. "I think I have loved you since I saw you clinging to that branch, refusing to give up, but I know it for certain now. You are everything I did not know I needed." Lila's breath caught. She had known her own feelings for weeks, but had been waiting for him to speak first. "I love you too. I have been falling in love with you a little more every day." He kissed her then, not the brief touch from before, but a real kiss, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Harrison pulled something from his pocket. "This was my mother's," he said, showing her a simple gold ring. "My father carried it with him through the entire war. He gave it to me before he died and told me to give it to someone worthy of it." "You are worthy of it, Lila. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Lila said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married 2 weeks later in Julian, with Mr. Peterson standing up as witness and half the town turning out to celebrate. It was a simple ceremony, but the joy was genuine. Afterward, they had a reception at the store where Peterson had laid out a feast, his gift to the couple. "You look happy," Peterson told Lila as they danced to music provided by a miner with a fiddle. "Truly happy." "I am," Lila said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I did not think I could be this happy." The first months of marriage brought adjustments. Learning to share space with another person was not always easy, even when that person was someone you loved. There were disagreements about how to spend money, about which horses to keep and which to sell, about a dozen small things. But they learned to talk through their conflicts, to compromise, to respect each other's perspectives. Winter came, and with it the isolation Harrison had warned her about. Snow closed off the valley for weeks at a time, but Lila found she did not mind. She used the time to read from Harrison's small collection of books, to sew clothes for them both, to plan improvements for the spring. And in the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked, or simply enjoyed the comfortable silence of two people perfectly at ease with each other. Spring brought new challenges. A band of outlaws passed through the area, stealing horses from several ranches. Harrison joined the posse that tracked them down, leaving Lila alone at the ranch for 3 terrifying days. When he returned, unharmed but exhausted, she clung to him with relief and anger mixed together. "Do not ever do that to me again," she demanded. "Do not leave me wondering if you are coming back. I had to go. They took 3 of our horses." "I do not care about the horses. I care about you." They argued for the first time, really argued, voices raised and harsh words spoken. But when the storm passed, they held each other and made promises. Harrison would not take such risks unnecessarily. Lila would try to understand that sometimes a man had to stand up for what was right. That summer, Lila realized she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. The nearest doctor was in Julian, an hour's ride away. Childbirth was dangerous, especially out in the wilderness. "We could move to town until the baby comes," Harrison suggested, but Lila refused. "This is our home. Our baby will be born here." Harrison sent word to Julian, and a midwife named Martha agreed to come stay with them when Lila's time grew near. Martha was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had delivered half the babies in San Diego County. She arrived in early winter and took over the household with good-natured authority. "Your husband is fretting like a mother hen," she told Lila one afternoon. You would think no woman in history had ever had a baby before. He is scared, Lila said. His mother died when he was young. I think he worries the same will happen to me. Well, we will just have to prove him wrong. When Lila's labor began, on a cold February night in 1879, Harrison paced outside like Martha predicted he would. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. More than once, Harrison tried to come inside, but Martha shooed him out firmly. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, a baby's cry split the air. Harrison burst through the door to find Lila propped up in bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "A son," Martha announced. "A healthy, strong son." Harrison approached slowly, as if afraid the scene would disappear. Lila held up the baby for him to see, and he looked down at the tiny red face with an expression of absolute wonder. "He is perfect," Harrison whispered. "We need to name him," Lila said. "I was thinking, if you agreed, we could call him Thomas, after your father." Harrison's eyes filled with tears. He bent and kissed Lila's forehead, then gently touched his son's tiny hand. Thomas Garrett. He would have been so proud. The baby changed everything. Their life revolved around feeding times and diaper changes and sleepless nights. But the joy was immeasurable. Harrison proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby. Lila found reserves of strength she did not know she possessed. When spring came and Martha finally left, reassured that both mother and baby were thriving, they settled into their new life as a family. Little Thomas was a happy baby, curious and alert. As he grew, he proved to have his father's love of horses and his mother's fearlessness. The ranch prospered. Harrison's reputation for training quality horses spread, and buyers came from as far as Los Angeles. They built the bigger barn Harrison had dreamed of and added a room onto the house for Thomas. Lila started a small garden, growing vegetables and herbs that flourished in the valley's protected microclimate. 2 years later, their daughter was born, delivered much more easily than Thomas had been. They named her Rose, for the wild roses that grew along the creek. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray-green eyes, and from her first breath, she was singing. Lila's lullabies became Rose's favorite thing, and the baby would quiet instantly at the sound of her mother's voice. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that threatened their water supply, harsh winters that took livestock, injuries and illnesses that tested their resilience. But through it all, they had each other. The love that had begun in those first desperate moments in the flood had deepened into something unshakable. One evening, when Thomas was 5 and Rose 3, the family sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky brilliant shades of orange and pink. Thomas was practicing with his small rope, trying to catch a fence post like his father had taught him. Rose sat in Lila's lap, singing to herself. "Do you ever regret it?" Harrison asked quietly. "Choosing this life instead of the security Peterson offered?" Lila looked at him in genuine surprise. "Not once, not for a single moment. It has been hard sometimes. The best things usually are." She reached over and took his hand. "That day in the flood, when I thought I was going to die, I remember thinking I had never really lived. But I was wrong. I had not lived yet. This, right here, this is living. The hard parts and the beautiful parts and everything in between." "I think about that day a lot," Harrison admitted. "How close we came to never having this. If I had been 5 seconds slower, if Copper had stumbled, if the rope had missed. But none of those things happened. You saved me, and we saved each other in all the ways that matter." Thomas successfully roped the fence post and let out a whoop of triumph. Harrison laughed and went to congratulate his son, lifting him high in the air. Rose wriggled out of Lila's lap and ran to join them, demanding her own turn to fly. Lila watched her family with a fullness in her heart that felt almost too big to contain. She thought about the frightened, desperate woman she had been just a few years ago, convinced her life was over before it had truly begun. She could never have imagined this. This happiness, this sense of belonging, this deep-boned certain knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who shared his father's gift with horses. By the time he was 10, he could gentle a wild Mustang as well as any adult. Rose remained the family's sunshine, bringing laughter and music into everything she did. She had inherited her mother's impulsiveness too, giving her parents more than one heart-stopping scare with her fearless adventures. Harrison's hair started showing threads of gray, and Lila found laugh lines around her eyes. But they grew into middle age together, their love maturing like good wine. They still talked for hours, still found new things to learn about each other. The passion remained too, banked like coals that would flare bright with the smallest breath of air. One autumn afternoon, when Thomas was 16 and Rose 14, a young woman arrived at the ranch asking for work. She was traveling alone, running from a bad situation, and something in her desperate eyes reminded Harrison of Lila all those years ago. "We have to help her," Lila said immediately. "She is terrified." They gave the girl work and a safe place to stay. Within a month, Thomas was hopelessly smitten, following the girl around like a puppy. Harrison and Lila watched with amused recognition, seeing their younger selves reflected in the awkward courtship. "Should we warn him?" Harrison asked. "Tell him that falling in love is complicated." "Would you have listened if someone warned you?" Lila replied. "Not for a second." "Then let him figure it out like we did." Thomas and the girl, whose name was Sarah, married 2 years later. They built a small house on the other side of the valley, close enough to help with the ranch but far enough for independence. When their first child was born, making Harrison and Lila grandparents, the circle felt complete. Rose eventually left for San Francisco to study music, breaking her parents' hearts but making them proud. She returned every summer with stories of the city and concerts and adventures. She never married, claiming she was married to her music, but she brought home a richness of experience that kept the ranch from becoming too isolated. As Harrison and Lila grew older, they gradually turned more of the ranch work over to Thomas and Sarah. They remained active, still able to work with the horses but content to take a less central role. They spent more time simply being together, taking rides through the mountains, sitting on the porch in the evenings, remembering. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Harrison gave Lila a painting he had commissioned in secret. It showed a woman on a branch in raging water, and a man on horseback reaching out with a rope. The artist had captured the moment perfectly, the desperation and determination and the impossible hope. "So we never forget," Harrison said. "How lucky we are." Lila hung it above their bed, where she could see it every morning when she woke. It reminded her that life could change in an instant, that courage and love could transform everything, that the best things were worth the risk. They grew old together, their hands becoming gnarled and spotted but always reaching for each other. They watched Thomas and Sarah's children grow, and then those children have children of their own. The ranch passed to Thomas, who ran it with the same care and love his father had. On a spring morning in 1913, when Harrison was 61 and Lila 57, they rode together to the spot where he had pulled her from the flood. The falls still roared with snowmelt, as powerful and dangerous as ever. They sat on their horses, old Copper long since replaced by younger mounts, and looked at the place where their story had begun. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not been there that day?" Lila asked. Every single day, Harrison replied. And every single day I am grateful I was. No regrets, not a single one. You, Lila looked at her husband, the man who had ridden into a flood to save her, who had offered her freedom when she expected a cage, who had loved her through 3.5 decades of joy and struggle. Not one. I would do it all again, exactly the same. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, their horses walking side by side as the spring sun warmed their old bones. Behind them, the falls kept roaring, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded there so long ago. But Harrison and Lila knew its power. It had nearly taken everything from them, and instead had given them everything worth having. That evening, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered for a family dinner, Lila looked around the table and felt the same overwhelming gratitude she had felt every day since Harrison pulled her from that flood. This life, this love, this family, none of it would have existed if not for one moment of desperation and courage. "What are you thinking about?" Rose asked, noticing her mother's expression. "About how grateful I am," Lila said simply, "for all of it, every moment." Harrison raised his glass. "To being grateful," he said, his eyes finding Lila's across the crowded table. "And to the day everything changed." "To the day everything changed," everyone echoed, though only Harrison and Lila fully understood what they were toasting. Later, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, they sat on the porch in their rocking chairs, holding hands as they had for decades. The stars blazed overhead, and somewhere in the distance a horse whinnied softly. "I love you," Harrison said, the same words he had spoken thousands of times but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Lila replied, squeezing his hand. "Always have, always will." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had built a life from nothing more than courage and love. The flash flood had tried to take Lila's life that August day in 1878, but instead it had given her everything. It had brought her to Harrison, and Harrison to her, and from that desperate moment had sprung decades of joy. As they finally rose to go inside, moving slowly with the caution of age, Lila paused to look back at the mountains silhouetted against the starlit sky. Somewhere out there, the falls still roared. But here, in this valley, in this life they had built together, there was only peace. Peace and love, and the quiet certainty that they had found exactly what they were meant to find in each other. The ranch house door closed behind them, shutting out the night. Inside, warmth and light waited, the home they had made together. And in the morning, they would wake side by side as they had for 35 years, and begin another day of the life they had chosen, the life that had chosen them, in the wild country where the flash flood had brought them together. Their story had begun in chaos and terror, in rushing water and desperate rescue. But it had become something beautiful, something enduring, something that would live on in their children and grandchildren for generations to come. The cowboy had ridden downstream and grabbed the woman before the falls, and in saving her life, he had found his own.